Hi everyone and welcome to the People Analytics channel. If this is your first time here, the whole point of this site is to help HR professionals and students develop their data science skills within the HR domain. So today we're going to continue our journey looking at the top 10 metrics that you can use if you're starting a People Analytics team from scratch. The metric that we're going to evaluate in this video is learning days per employee. It's a pretty powerful data point. You can look at whether or not it's competency development, employee productivity, return on training investment, or use it for your high potential nomination and succession planning process. So if you haven't done so already, please hit subscribe and let's start learning. Okay, now as we progress through People Analytics, many of the topics will become more advanced. We're definitely going to cover predictive measures and machine learning application within the HR domain. But for this video series, our focus is on the top 10 metrics you can utilize to start a People Analytics team from scratch. In a prior video, we went over promotion velocity, and today we're now moving forward with learning days per employee. Now before we proceed, I'd like to remind everyone of Einstein's quote that if you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. It's really important to remember that the whole purpose of data analytics is to make executive conversations better. So when you're taking any type of tool, you have to present it in a concise and easy to understand manner, otherwise it will not be effective. Now what makes data analytics shine is when you use it as part of a overall improvement method. And there's a lot of methods out there, Six Sigma, Agile. The one I like is the improvement method by Professor Brix. Now, this six-step process is iterative, and what you really try to do is engage key stakeholders, continue to ask why, leverage your networks, and then utilize pilot programs to test out an idea before you roll it out in scale. Now, in terms of learning days per employee, the key step in the improvement method is the measurement for improvement. What we're trying to do is understand what is the content of our learning delivery, how is it impacting employee capabilities, and are we delivering it in a fashion that balances employee productivity with skill development? Now, one of the mistakes a lot of companies make is they limit the scope at which they evaluate learning activities in the business. Typically, companies will look at things such as academic degrees, professional certifications, company-sponsored in-house courses, as well as leadership assessments. Now, while those are great, they actually leave out a lot of other activities that deal with learning and help you understand how employees are relating to each other as well as their superiors. That includes stuff such as wearables, productivity trackers, RFID badges, the coaching and mentoring aspect, as well as a lot of post-project reviews. The goal of data science is to collect as many data points as possible and consolidate them into a centralized warehouse where you can report. Now, just as it's important to track all of the learning happening in the business, you also want to incorporate the costs associated with each program. So whether it's digital delivery, classroom-based, mentoring, and so forth, by incorporating cost and understanding the fixed and variable components, you're going to understand how each of the learning programs influences the P&L, and that'll help you actually track the return on training investment, which is a cool metric that we'll cover in another video. Now for some geeky stuff. When it comes to data capture, it's really important that a People Analytics team understands the different types of data to make sure that they're pulling in as many data points as possible. There's something called structured data, which is probably what you're very familiar with. It's simply data that can be stored in a row or column format. This is really your typical HRIS system, ERP system, and it usually has SQL or an equivalent backend. Now the problem with structured data is that it's the least amount of data available, yet that's what companies typically rely on to do their metrics. The other type of data is known as semi-structured as well as unstructured, and this is stuff that cannot be put in a row or column format. So it could be things such as XML, email, texting, images, video, audio, and PDF. All of this material is useful for your People Analytics function. So when you're actually creating your consolidated databases, you need to make sure that you're not only capturing structured data, you're also incorporating the much larger, much more important semi-structured and unstructured data. Okay, so now moving into the formula itself, remember the goal is to keep things simple while also capturing enough data to provide insight to the executives. Now, learning days per employee only requires 4 data points. You need the total employees, and this includes all employees, whether or not they actually took a course or not. You need all of the completed learning content. You need the time to complete, and you want to express that in hours. And then you need the business days or the calendar days for the company. In terms of the formula, calculating learning days per employee requires 3 steps. The first, what you want to do is consolidate all of the completed learning content for the period. Once you do that, you multiply your completed content by the average number of time to complete for each individual activity. And you want to express that in hours. By doing that, you'll get the total learning in hours for the period you're evaluating. The second step is you want to take all of the employees that were eligible during the evaluation period. It's not just the people who took courses, it's the people who were eligible and either chose not to do learning or were not availed by their management. Once you have those 2 steps completed, the third step is you take the total learning hours and you divide them by the total number of employees. And then from there, you divide it by 8 hours, and that'll give you the overall learning days per employee. Okay, let's test our math skills a little bit. Now let's say that in step 1, we have 600 learning activities completed during a calendar year. And the average time to complete is 2.5 hours. By timesing 600 by 2.5, you get total learning hours of 1,500. Proceeding to the second step, you calculate that during the evaluation period, 50 employees were eligible to take learning. In the third step, you take 1,500 total learning hours, you divide it by 50 total eligible employees, and then you divide that outcome by 8 hours. And it gets you a number, 3.75 learning days per employee. Now we just have to figure out what this means. Now with all metrics, what you want to do is once you calculate the outcome, you want to compare that number against internal benchmarks as well as external best practices. Now learning days per employee indicates the breadth, depth, and quality of learning that's occurring across all employee segments. And it's really important that that number is consistent. You want to make sure that employees are receiving the same amount of training, and the content will just be different based on where they are in their career path, what type of leader they are they a senior professional, but ultimately you want to make sure that everyone gets consistent learning because that helps reinforce your culture. Okay, as we wrap this up, I want to highlight that learning days per employee can also be used as part of your data-driven 9-box. So instead of relying simply on the subjective opinions of executives, you can incorporate promotion velocity, learning days per employee, as well as other data points to differentiate your talent within the 9-box using objective data points. And by doing this, you ensure that people analytics is actually helping executives have a better conversation. So that's it for this KPI. Once again, join me for future videos. And if you like what you hear, then click subscribe. I'll see you next time.